What advice would you give husbands and fathers who are trying to juggle it all, like trying to be present in their families while achieving their goals, while achieving their God-given purpose?
You cannot put everything else before your family. What ends up happening, you get fruits of your labor, but you get the minimum result.
Our peace and blessings, all praise be to the Most High God, His Son Christ, and Holy Spirit. Welcome to another edition of the Men of Valor, Husbands of Purpose podcast. Where we're empowering husbands to lead in life, love, faith, and purpose. And today we have a special guest, right? We have Coach Tony Kimble in the building. Coach, and I want to say, Tony, thank you. Welcome to the show. 20 years in marriage. You also 20 years in the education field. And as well as that, not just the 20 years in the educational field, you have a movement called 50 Educators in 50 States, as well as a podcast called Transforming Your Lives. Now, this is very inspiring. On this show, we like to speak to husbands, speak to men that has a purpose outside of their marriage. Yes, marriage is the first ministry of a husband, but we want to speak to
Right.
people that got things going on outside of their marriage. So with that being said, let's kick it off.
When you think about marriage, it's you have the picture of what you think it looks like when you start out, right? Those first 3 years, 5 years. But over time, it begins to, it develops. And you got to be able to develop with it to make that transition with it. It's more changes than the iPhone, right? So it's like iPhone 16, right? So it's getting those updates. And if I can relate it to the iPhone and not trying to give them any credit, but I think that's kind of a good drive line for me, is that you have to constantly have updates because there are things that are going to come up, even conversations that you had that, you got a good friend that's going to tell you, but it's nothing like your marriage that you as a husband have to lead it and make those adjustments.
Now, with those updates, what's one of the major updates that you can say, like you say, relating to the iPhone, they have, I think iPhone, one of the major updates was like, I don't have an iPhone, I'm a Galaxy user, but,
Okay,
you know,
got you. Cool.
I'm a Galaxy user. What was one major update or one major key that really helped with, establishing 20 years of marriage?
Right. So it's understanding, it's a thing, you want to love your wife, right? But the part that you have to understand is you got to get clarity on yourself.
Mm.
If you don't have clarity about yourself, it's harder for you to lead someone uh, in a particular direction. Now, does that mean there's perfection there? No, it is not perfection. What happens is that you're being perfected. So maybe year three, maybe you didn't get the anniversary right, right? So it was a funny story that happened for me. We're in a church and I get up and I'm giving a testimony. And this might have been year, I don't know what it is, two or three. And I get up and I forget how long I've been married. So that's like crazy embarrassment from the standpoint of, man, what did I just do? But then coming back later to make that a priority because that's a priority for her. So really getting the understanding of you. And sometimes we say, and you got to separate this whole idea of being selfish. Okay. Selfishness and leading are two different things. So one way to kind of overcome that selfishness is understanding who am I called to be? Where am I going? Where am I supposed to take them? And knowing when it's time to make a pivot. I think that's key.
Now, how did you discover your purpose? Find out who you called to be, because when life is happening, you got marriage, you got, career, you got children, and you just got, other elements that just, that just impacts a marriage. How did you find your purpose? Because some men out there are still trying to find their purpose so they can actually lead more efficient in their relationship with their wife.
For me, it was honestly God. I have no other way of saying it. I wish I, had some type of other skills and abilities, but I understand that when we talk about downloads, it's important to allow God to lead you. And there are times where stubbornness comes about, where you're just like, uh, I didn't I didn't do this the right way, or I could have done this in a different way. And it's going back and saying, you know what? We should have done it this way right here. I was wrong. It's saying, all right, hey, um, the way that we went in this direction was not the best way. It's allowing God to lead our lives and not having just this profession that he's leading your life, but allow him to really truly lead your life. So that means peeling back some of the ego tickles. I can't get the word that having the ego where it's not about me. When you're serving, man, it's not about you. It's about loving and pushing others forward. And that's not an easy thing. Now, this is 20 years talking. Now, if you got me a good 5 year, I wouldn't have had this type of understanding on how to be a leader.
Yeah, and one thing about being a leader, like you said, going back, okay, when we should have did it this way, you know, it's about putting that pride to the side. The scriptures say pride is leads to destruction, right? I'm paraphrasing. It says
Right.
pride leads to destruction. So a lot of times, us as husbands, like we'll make a mistake and we don't want to go apologize, or we'll do something wrong and don't want to go and backtrack and say, well, you know what, maybe we should have did it this way, or maybe I should have, listened to you in this matter. Because sometimes, we as husbands, and I was there at one point in time, I had to feel like everything had to go my way because the scriptures say husbands lead, husbands lead. But then I had to figure out, hold on, sometimes I'm leading us in the ditch, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes,
Right.
the Holy Spirit speaking to her, helping give me guidance, actually pointed us in a better direction. And so I had to learn to be able to humble myself and be able to say, hey, my bad, your way was better.
Yeah. And that's tough when you begin to look at it when you're in the immature state. It's my way or the highway, but that's not. It's here's the weird thing about it. You wouldn't go on a business or a job and try to lead that way, but you'll try to lead that way in your house. And here's the amazing thing about it, and this is just recently for me. You cannot put everything else before your family. What ends up happening, you get fruits of your labor, but you get the minimum result when you have it out of order. It's like this. When a machine is out of order, it does not function at its proper capacity. And what has to happen is you have to rearrange. Does work is work ahead of your family? Because in our society, it's about being a provider. But sometimes, man, you got to be careful with that part too of being a provider because that looks different in different seasons of your life. You got to be extremely careful because you can be a provider monetarily, but emotionally, they're not getting you.
Brief interruption, real quick. If you listen to this and you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below. Therefore, you're notified whenever we have another Men of Valor, Husbands of Purpose podcast. Also, you can share it out if you find this episode valuable. And fellas, if you're looking to have a deeper relationship with your wife, cultivate more conversations, more intimacy, download our free video guide. It's in the descriptions below, or you can just go to connectionconversations.com, download our free video guide, and start getting more intimate with your wife and just really build that bond, build that friendship, build that love. Go to connectionconversations.com, or you can just click the link in the description. Peace and blessings. Back to the episode. That is good right there. Provider monetarily, but emotionally, they're not getting you. And it seems like, you know, our culture, or I don't even want to say our culture, husbands in general, you know, thinking about back then is like, you have to supply, you have to supply, you have to supply monetarily. And I remember, certain fathers, like my dad, one, he wasn't really emotional.
Right,
Really,
right,
might have
right,
showed his emotions when he got upset or something like that.
right,
And,
right.
showed his emotions. He showed love, but like just being able to connect with your family emotional is such a big thing. And society has made it a way like, okay, if a man is not providing, financially, he's no good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
versus a man that may be providing emotionally for his family, but struggling financially, you know, he's no good. So we have to have this balance, you know, being able to do it all, like being able to balance, you know, being a provider emotionally, being a provider monetarily, and being able to take care of your family as well as business. And you know, you touched on this. So let me ask you, what advice would you give husbands and fathers who are trying to juggle it all, like trying to be present in their families while achieving their goals, while achieving their God-given purpose in life?
Right. So I would say again, going back to allowing God to lead you. And what does that look like? That's a devotion time. And it's not a devotion of just, it's simply asking God, God, I don't know how to do this. I really don't know how. Can you lead me, and allowing the Holy Spirit to lead you? And there are times where you're gonna mess it up, but it's the when you go and redo it, what happens is all you're doing is building a stronger foundation. So what that means is that setting aside time that you're going to spend with your wife, right? Finding out what she wants, right? Finding out what your kids need, and setting aside being very intentional about that, and not allowing society to direct what your family looks like, right? So, as the man, and I'm not saying the men should just step aside. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, just like you were just talking about, with the fathers, like what my father, I love him to death. He was there. He laid down a foundation for me. Now, what I have to do is I have to take it, because the path that I'm taking is not the same path that he took. So I got to be able to adjust it, to say, you know what? When I take them to the school in the morning, I got to have a conversation with them. When they're coming back, I got to ask them how their day was. Little things like that have a major impact on them in those years, moving up into, being a teenager and then moving into an adult.
That's great. So it's like really just being intentional with your time. Like we're intentional about business. We're intentional about, you know, the things we've been called to do outside of the household, whether that's ministry, whether that's education, you know, whether that's, you know, whatever business people are called to do. It's like being intentional about that, as well as being intentional, you know, about that family time. Because, you know, you hear about so many people that have success outside of the household, even pastors, people
Right,
in
right,
ministry. It's like they have
right.
success outside the household, but in the household, it's like things are going crazy. It is not like everything's going to be perfect inside the household, but at least if you're being intentional about having those conversations with your children, you know, supplying your children needs to the best of your ability at that given time within that season, and figuring out, you know, what your wife desires. What does she desire? What can I give her at this time? Whether that's emotional, whether it's financial, whether it's physical, whatever it needs, is really about being intentional with your time. Now, you know, one thing I had got, you know, moving around with business, work, just a lot of things. And I had to look at my schedule like, you know, I'm spending time with my family, but it was no dedicated time. When I say dedicated time, like, let me plug this hour in while I'm just sitting with my youngest son. You
Right.
know,
Yep.
let me plug this hour in while I'm sitting with my youngest daughter. Let me
Yep.
plug this time where me and my wife are just doing Bible study, and that's sitting really building with each other, you know? So that's
Right.
part of it,
Yep.
being intentional about that family time and family structure. Now,
Absolutely.
with you being 20 years educator, right?
Yeah.
20 years in marriage, how has marriage helped develop you in your business, in the educational field, and things that you've called to do?
I would say it's not about me. And you got to be careful there too, because you can say, well, it's not about me, and not necessarily get your cup filled. So what I mean by it's not about me, basically what I've learned is that whether that is business, whether that's, as an educator, is that you have to find who is Tony, and what does Tony look like in those areas. although you can see replicas, or you can see something that you may say, man, you know what, I like what he or she's doing right there, but you got to find out what is it for you, because it's not a cookie cutter way to approach your calling on your life. When you think about transformation, 5 years wasn't my fifth year as an educator. I was about to give up. That fourth or fifth year, I was about to give up. I was like, I was about to deuce it out, and I'm getting out of this classroom. But you need people to come into your life, just as well as with the marriage, to come in and help you reshape your thoughts and see it from a different perspective, so that you can begin to be completed. Right. So it talks about in Philippians, where it talks about, Paul was telling the church of Philippi, he says, you know, he's began a good work in you, and he's going to complete it, and he's going to carry it on until the day that Jesus comes back. Well, if you understand that, it's a continuous process, and you can't be stuck at a place of saying, you know what, I'm good right here. Going back to the iPhone analogy, you got to get the update, because you're going to need this different information. For me, is the word of God to help you through this different season of your life.
Now, do you think your wife plays a big part in that, helping you get those downloads, or helping giving you that input? Because you said in year 5 you was ready to let it go. How does the relationship with your wife help you push forward, encourage you?
Right. So, you have to ask yourself, what are you here for? You had to really ask yourself, are you just here for the fact of this is the traditional thing to do, get married, get a good job, have kids? Is that it? And not look at what comes along with that. What comes along with that, just like in education, you have to grow. And growing is not easy. And you have to, and for my wife, what happens is, I don't think we really realize this. You're telling, let me back up. You can't get married just because you love a person.
Mm. Speak on it. Speak on that.
That's part of the relationship that you have. You're telling a person that's completely, you may have these unique qualities about yourself that you like, that you love about a person, but you're around this person a lot. And you got to be able to, and I remember having a premarital counseling session, and they said this, and it didn't click for me, because for us, we didn't necessarily, we were in two different states at the time with our relationship. They told us, they said, hey, you're going to end up, simple stuff will cause agitation to you. And the person used was, he says, it's the way that, she may use her toothpaste. That may agitate you, where she may not, she may roll the toothpaste up, and you may just like it flat. You have to now, and that goes back to you separating yourself to say, man, is this really worth it for me to get upset about? Is this really going to help us? Do I really want to hold on to, man, this is the way I turn. No, this is the way I turn the clothes basket. And you get to a point where you say, man, this ain't, you look at the weight of it and you're saying, this is not worth it. This is wasting my time. If you want to take the basket that way, so be it. If you want the drinks turned this way, it doesn't matter. So you got to let go of it and learn how. I don't like to say pick your battles, but some stuff is really not worth it. It doesn't carry the weight of an argument, or just just a disagreement. Yeah.
My thing is, one thing that I say, I've been saying this for some years, a long time. I say let it go and let it grow. You got to learn to
Yeah.
let things go so things can actually grow. So with that being said, it's like, let me let this whole toothpaste situation go. Let me let this laundry thing go so we can grow in other areas. And not only
Right.
we
Yeah.
can grow, I can grow in other areas and look at
Right.
like,
Yeah.
is this worth it? Is
Yeah.
this worth it? Where can I compromise at? Where can I change at? Marriage has really shown me marriage has shown me a lot about myself, being able to, whether it's teaching me patience, whether
Right.
it's teaching me
Absolutely.
gratitude, how to really love. You love your children. Me, I had my children before I was married. Some of my oldest three, I had them before I was married. But
Yeah.
it really showed me, how to even love them more,
Right. Yeah.
how to love them more, how to love someone else more than you love yourself. And marriage is truly, marriage is truly a great journey.
Right. It is.
And you know, with marriage being a journey, balancing, going back to the educational field, right? I'm going to ask you this: How did you what how did you get into the educational field? Let's talk about that because you're leading inside your household. You became a teacher. 5 years, you wanted to give it up, but here we is. 20 years later, you're still in that, and you're leading. Not only you're just a regular educator, you are leading. You are
Right. Yeah.
leading. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
So it wraps back around. I played college football, so I love football. Right. So and at the time, I didn't know any other way to stay around the game at that time, and it was, well, I become a teacher, and I became a math teacher. And it was just honest with you. I just wanted to coach football. That's just it. I wanted to coach football. And that's what led me to not understanding there were different combinations on how that could happen. And my perspective was so jaded, it was so singular, so linear, and thinking, okay, the only way I can coach football is to go and work in school systems. So that's the genesis of just loving football. And hey, I got a math degree. Let me go in this classroom and start teaching people. But yeah, that was a whole different. Go ahead.
No, that makes me think like, God has the way he moves is something else. Like your whole thing was, okay, well, I want to coach football, so I'm gonna go in here and be a math teacher, right? But
Yep.
then here years later, it's like he's taking, you still have the love for football, but he cultivated something deep inside you within the educational field. Now you have a movement called 50 Educators in 50 states. Like the Most High it just shows how he works on us in different ways and move things in a way that we don't even understand till we look back
Right.
years later, like, okay, wow, this
Yep.
is all for that.
Yeah. And that's the part that I think that's transformation. So this whole idea of transformation, that's what it is. It's okay to kind of bask in where you are right now, but you're going to higher, and you got to be careful on not being stuck.
Be careful of not being stuck. Let's talk about the 50 educators in 50 states. Like let's talk about that because that's one thing to say, okay, I started in wanting to be a coach, but then I became a math teacher. How did you go from now is 50 educators in 50 states? Like really, let's let's sit right there for a minute. Let's talk about this. Because
Right.
some people they become teachers, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's what they do. They just teach. They just teach. But you said, okay, I'm going to do more. I'm going to do more. So let's talk about that.
Right. So year 10 of the educational journey, I became a consultant. Um, um, I chuckled a little bit when you asked me how did I become a teacher. It was letting go of my love. Like I loved football. And it was a love that I had to learn how to let go of, right? Because as coaches, like I spent tons of time looking at film and doing all that coaching stuff. But it comes a time where you got to make a decision. Okay, is this is this, you know, it's going to benefit me, but is there a greater responsibility that I have here? So year 10, again, I had to let go of the game. Everybody was shocked. In fact, I was in position to become that was my second head coaching job. And I gave it up to become a math consultant. So at that particular point of becoming a math consultant, my whole life shifted because now instead of being a classroom teacher and leading groups of kids and maybe some math uh, department meetings, now I'm leading in sometimes school districts, schools to a different direction. So that was a huge transition for me. And even in that transition, I had to learn how to be an effective leader. So as I and I did that for about 10 years of being a consultant, which means I'm going into school districts and I'm supposed to be the expert and I'm going around giving them my professional perspective on how to grow their schools. Well, what evolved in that is that most of my conversations were with principals, were with district leaders. And when you have those conversations, they are totally different and they're more precise and your perspective has changed. So when you talk about 50 educators in 50 states, it's about transformation. I'm huge on research, meaning I go out and I find out if I'm not good at it or if I have questions about it, I'm gonna go out and research and find out how to get better. I'm gonna talk to people. How do I get better at this? So this podcast was just, reaching out to 50 educators across these 50 states because transformation doesn't look the same in every state. And that transformation is going to inspire others to live a transformed life. So if I hear, oh man, you grew a school from an F rating to an A rating. Well, how did you do that? What are the principles behind that? What are the strategies that you use to ensure that happened? And when people hear it, they one recognize, man, I'm not by myself, right? Because it's saying, okay, if I'm at an F school, all right, there's hope from coming out of it. Well, talking to the different educators, you'll be able to gain a different perspective. Going back to year 5, one of the most, uh, the greatest thing that I did was I went to a 2-week institute that revolutionized me as an educator. I was the sit in the seat militant, don't say nothing, talk when I talk, you don't talk, and I want you to sit there, you better not say nothing, when bell rings, you go out. Well, that was crazy.
Mm.
That was crazy. Why? Goes back to adjustments. That child, nor did I build a culture of learning. It was a culture of, hey, you just do what I say. Well, no, I'm not building leaders. Leadership is influence, no more, no less. So I had to build. So that's why I'm reaching out to 50 educators in 50 states so that you tell your story. How did you lead people out? How did you lead your school system out? How did you lead your school out? How did you lead your classroom out of where you were? And people hear that and then inspires something in them to inspire a revolution in them to say, you know what? I'm here right now, but I can make this, I can make it out. And that person connects with that person. And then we begin to see some type of traction towards growth.
Now, how, like, what kind of impact are you seeing with this 50 educators in 50 states?
So the impact, so the impact is right now I'm moving into my second person. So even with the small clips that I'm having, it's you know, it's small impacts for me, kind of seeing social media wise. Um, on LinkedIn, it's definitely spreading where people are interacting with that particular leader, and those particular clips that I'm cutting up and putting on there, it's allowing people to understand and to lead differently. So I don't have a metric to kind of track any type of growth at the moment, but it's just at this moment as we further develop, it's going to be where I have something to measure by.
And what's your bigger vision? What's the big vision behind it? Like what do you see? Like, let's say 5 years from now, 50 educators, 50 states, what would you like that to look like, you know what I'm saying, at that point in time?
Right. So it would look like not just a conference, because I think a conference happens once a year, but it's establishing um, just this movement of educators that are transformational leaders. So for me, I'm not talking to everybody. I think I recognize that. I'm not talking to everybody because your pathway may be different. Years ago, that would have messed me up, but right now, I'm talking about building a community of people that are looking to um, change education, not in the traditional sense. Because right now, as educators, you are teaching kids that are going to have jobs that do not exist. So I want to develop this community in which a group of educators can come together, sharpen each other's tools, go out and impact um, the schools in these different states.
I see that. I see the vision and I can see how it will impact because the school system hasn't changed. Like the
Right.
school system hasn't changed at all. So by you, this movement, I can see how it will change. I can see how it will impact, other children because children learn differently.
Yep.
Children learned differently back then, but they was forced to learn the same way. But even
Right.
more so now, children are learning, different ways. So I can see the how much impact this will have on families, on communities, and more so those leaders that
Yep.
y'all are growing, those leaders that y'all are grooming. Now I can see it to have great impact in society.
And that's the part where if you're talking about change, sometimes we try to change on levels that will not bring us the most impact. The most impact comes when you change leaders because they are the ones that are directing, for lack of better words, the show. So the conversations that you have with a superintendent, the conversations you have with principals, not that they are the chief of the show, but that you got to change them because if they're driving the bus, kids, the people sitting back there in the seat can only talk. The ones that are in the driver's seats have the impact on the change.
Now, let me ask you this. If there's a teacher that's listening right now, that may be struggling, that may be in year one, year two, undecided, like, what to do, because, teachers don't get paid a lot as well.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you, and my thing, I think teachers should be paid a lot more. You got to deal with like 20. If it's one classroom, it's 20 or 30 students, right? But
Right.
then
Yeah.
if you got like junior high, high school, you got like 100 some students you got to do every day because each period is like another
Right.
20,
Right.
30. So yeah, I think they should definitely get paid more. But if there's a teacher listening right now that's saying, hey, I don't know where to go. I feel like quitting. I feel like giving up. Like, what would you say for them to find their purpose, whether it's in the teaching field or outside? What would you tell that person?
Right. I would tell them to pause a moment, um, and ask yourself, what why am I here? And begin to look at small change over time. Whether that's and this is different for me. If that means you just need to take a day off tomorrow, so be it. If you got a day, take the day off, get yourself together, recognize, hey, where I am right now is not where I want to be at. Communicate with your administrator and let them know, hey, this is going crazy. Also, you're not by yourself. This has happened to numerous first year teachers where you're asked to perform a job at a level that is very different. I'll say that. So don't quit. I know the feeling. I know what it feels like. Find that thing. Connect with a leader. Connect with a mentor. In fact, give me a call. I'll help you through it. It's not an easy task. I will agree with you 100%. But don't back up. You got a group of kids that you will have an impact on. For me, in many cases, I was the only black math teacher they ever had. So So you understand that your impact spreads generations, not just a day, but your impact has a greater reach. You
Wow,
can do
that's
it.
powerful right there. That's powerful. And like you say, you can reach out to him. If you need some accountability, need someone to speak to help get you going, you can reach out to Coach Tony Kimble. And speaking of black math teachers, I had a black math teacher, right? A black male math teacher. I believe it was ninth or 10th grade. His name was Mr. Murray from Chester, South Carolina. Shout out to Mr. Murray if you listen to this. If you yeah, I really liked him. I didn't do that great in math, but
Yeah.
because I learned different. But he
Yeah.
understood me and he understood me. He got it and he accepted me and like, just allow me to do certain things and make it through the class. I passed the class, sure. But
Right.
he was definitely like a supporter, definitely a supporter. So that's great right there. And how has, you know, how has your wife supported you in this area as you're growing the 50 educators in 50 states?
Right. So the way that she's helped me is she's my sounding board. So, it's a lot that she does. It's just
Bring it
I
out,
could
brother.
give you
Bring it out.
I could
Bruh,
just
listen,
give you
bring it out, and then show her the clips. Like, oh, listen, I said you do a lot, and show it all to
right. So I'm being very intentional right now by telling. So even because here's the thing, for us as males, we have a male perspective. In education, there are much more females. And sometimes I drive based on a male's perspective. Well, for her, she's gonna tell me, I ask her, what about this color combination? No, that's more manly. And I'm like, nothing's wrong with it. It looks good to me. Well, it look good to you, then go ahead and post it. I have to listen to those small tidbits to get it from a female's perspective, and she does a really great job with letting me know. Maybe hey baby, you're spending too much time on this, or hey baby, telling me because sometimes you can lose sight of being ambitious, and you may not have a time clock on, and she serves as that time clock to let me know, okay, you're right. I am spending too much time. I am pushed by ambition. Keep it simple. The KISS method. Keep it super simple. And that's, she does a great job with making sure that when my radar sensors are not on, she's able to see my blind spots and let me know what my blind spots are to say, hey, Tony, man, you're spending too much time here. How about just leaving it alone and looking at it on another day? And that's what I need because it's hard for you to see your blind spots, right? In vehicles now, they have the little, when you're finna get into the next lane, somebody's behind you because there's a blind spot. And I think she does an excellent job. And I've learned to see that's her strength. So I don't have to go out and ask somebody, well, this. No, she lets me know, and it's in a loving way to help me grow. To say, you know what, don't spend too much time on this. And that's a simple example to kind of bring clarity to the point.
No, that's good. And her being able to see your blind spots, therefore there's a level of trust that had
Mhm.
to grow because that just don't happen over that. I mean, that just don't happen overnight. That happens over time, especially when men, when us men, we've been called to lead, we've been called to, move towards a purpose, we've been called to grow, we've been called to for leadership, and to have the wife to be able to trust in her. I'm like, okay, I see I am spending too much time. You know what? These colors don't work. Yeah, let me do this a different way. That is big right there. Because a lot of times, going back to one thing I said earlier, us men sometimes, we like our wives to submit to us all the time because that's what the scriptures say. But right before that says submit one to another. And then it says wives submit. So we gotta learn to submit to each other and especially like, listen, I know she got my back. I trust you on that.
Ooh, So listen, that part, I don't even look. I used to be big on that in my first part of the marriage. You know, I need you to submit. I need you need to submit. The Bible says you need to submit. Here's the powerful part of it. Here's the powerful part of it. You got to catch the back part of it by saying, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church.
Bring it out. There you go. That's it.
That part is a sacrificial love that is not based on emotions. It is a commandment to just love. So there are times where you just like, nope. And the Holy Spirit is saying, and that's how all of that happens, where it becomes a more functional part that you don't have to say it. It's it's like a machine that runs properly, and not referring to the wife as a machine, but just using that analogy to say, um, it's a responsibility on our part. And I think that's the part that I've learned over time, is that it's a huge responsibility to have a sacrificial love. It's not, man, it is not, it is laying down your will all the time, not all the time. That ain't, uh, it's laying it down for the bigger cause and recognizing that it pays off. It does. Now, again, going back, year 5, year 6, year 7, but I can have this conversation with you. 20, I can have it in a much more mature state to say, man, that's submitting part and submit one to another. Good, yep. But the part about us loving is a grand responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh,
And going, husbands of your wives like Christ of the church. What did Christ do? He gave his life. He sacrificed for his people. He gave to the people. He healed the people. He blessed the people. So that's that, like you said, that's that part. And when you have that, it the relationship can only but grow. It can only
right.
but grow when you have that, you know. And one thing I want to pull up. It was one thing you said before, not in this interview, but in our pre talking, you said loving your wife in the different transitions in her life. Can you? That's deep right there, right? And it seems like it goes back to what we're saying right now. Like husbands love your wife like Christ loved the church, because
Yeah.
the church, the people have always transitioned, have always changed, and everything like that. So can you break that down for us? Loving your wife in the different transitions in her life. Can you break that down? And what does that look like?
Right. So for her, so for us, man, we're so linear. So meaning that if dot here, if it's like from A to B, right? That's who we are. We're as men, that doesn't make us less than a man. We're just so linear. But for women, their wives, they can be at point A, go to D, then go to J, come back around and say, yeah, I was talking about A, then go to F, and be able to network in all those areas and still be fluent in who they are. So that statement is just saying she's going to go through being a wife. Okay, that's one state that's going to evolve. It's never going to stop evolving. She's going to go through the stage of being a mother. Although she has this natural, innate ability in her, it looks different for her in each stage. So, as a wife, of loving your wife, it's if she's starting a new job, you got to be able to support her in such a way that when she goes on her job, she understands she's loved. She knows that she's loved. If it's going crazy on the job, I know I can come home and be loved by my husband. She's always gonna be loved by her kids. The kids just gonna love their mother. Just what it is, right? So you got that stage of being a wife. It a mother, it changes. Their baby stages, it's different, right? You got the preteen stage, that's different. Then the teenager stage, that's Lord have mercy. That's why I'm in right now. Then you got uh then you got that child leaving the house, right? So my son is 13 years old, 5 years, he's out. He's going to college. if that's something he desires. So that's a different stage for her too, because now she's letting go of something she's birthed. In year 18, he's transitioning to college or whatever he desires he want to, do. Maybe stays at home, whatever the case may be. Then you got to look at the stage where she ain't got no kids in the house now. So you got to wrap back around almost like you're wrapping back around to year 1, 2, and 3, where
Mm.
now you have to have something more than just love. You got to have a friendship. That friendship is that I like being around you. I like being around you during this time. So it's just those different stages, man, that you have to look at. And you, as the husband, can't stay stuck because she's going to change. She's going to evolve. She's going to look at herself differently as a 25-year-old compared to a 35-year-old, and 35-year-old compared to a 45-year-old, 55-year-old, and so on, because she has different responsibilities. And we're still trying. Yeah, let me push it back to you, man. Yeah.
No, that's it. Loving her doing the different transition, those different cycles in life. You got to be there and just love her and love her. And while you're loving her, it's teaching you how to grow and adapt, you
Right.
know, and teach yourself how to, uh, transition with those changes as well. Because I'm pretty sure, like, while 5 years the sun's going to be out, you have to grow. You got to get used to certain things, and
Right.
it's just a growing experience, and you know that's one thing I always say. Us as husbands, we have to have multiple hats. Wives do too, but we're talking about the husbands right now. We have
Right.
to
Yeah.
have multiple hats. And it was like we have multiple responsibility, multiple hats when it comes to our wives, because her transition, some husbands' transition could be their wife going through a sickness. So you got to
Right.
be
Yeah.
put on that, the hat as like, what? How do I become a coach? How do I become a healer? How do I become her? How do I become her encourager? Or
Right.
maybe a wife that's battling some on the job or out of work and feeling a certain type of way. So you gotta love her in that transition. How do I inspire her to keep going? So husbands, we
Yeah.
have to have and wear different hats. That's key right there.
Right. Absolutely.
So, it's been great having you on here. What can people tell us more? Where can people find you at on social media? Your podcast. Let's talk about that before I have another powerful question, right? Before we wrap it up. But before we do, let everyone know where they can find you at on social media and about your 50 educators in 50 states, and where can they find your Transforming Lives podcast?
All right. So on Instagram is Coach. The handle is Coach Tony Kimble, Kimble. The podcast is on all major podcast platforms. It's Transforming Lives podcast, hosted by Tony Kimble. Um, and yeah, you go to Apple, you go to Spotify, you will see the most recent clips. Also on YouTube, I do a live. Yeah, of course, I just ripped the audio from the video. I mean, from the live stream. So I do a live stream with this as well. So it's going to be Tony on YouTube, Tony Kimble TV, and those are the places you can reach me, reach out. Um, and 50 educators in 50 states. Share with your teaching buddy. Let them know, somebody in education, whether it's going good or bad. Share it with them. Not just, man, it's going bad. They're about to just, no, share with them it's going good or bad. Because, transition is not just for the bad times, it's for the good times too, because it can be good. And we don't understand that it may need a transition.
And how
Yeah.
often do you do your lives, or what days do you do your lives on YouTube? So if someone's listening, they watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, how can they, tune into your live podcast?
Right. So right now they're on Thursdays. They're bi-weekly. So the time frame is between 5 and 7. Just trying to accommodate the educators and be honorable with their time. So there is going to be bi-weekly on Thursdays between 5 and 7 p.m.
And 50 educators in 50 states, that's for male and female only, or you only work with males, what is it?
Male and female. Yeah, it's it's people that I see that are want to have on the show, and just reach out to them. Right now, we're looking at 3 states. We've talked to people in Texas. Have an upcoming one in December. That's Mississippi. Uh, then we have one that's going to be in January. That's going to be Colorado. But there are going to be some fill-in dates as well. So working on Ohio, and got one more state I'm working on. So, and
That
we're
sounds
hoping to do that by November 2025. So I may pick up some more, a couple of, more in the next couple of months.
That sounds good. 50 educates 50 states. I look forward to seeing that grow. And one last question. If you could leave men listening with one big takeaway, whether it's something about leadership, whether it's something about marriage or something about purpose, what would it be?
Um, I would say allow, find more about God, you'll find more about yourself. That's the key part of even my evolution as a person. The more I found about the characteristics of God, who he was, with the promises of God, I began to know more about myself. And as you do those things, your viewpoint changes, your perspective changes. Transformation is not easier, but it is obtainable at that point where you allow God to lead your life.
And finding more about God, finding more about self. Does that consist of just reading the Bible, praying, meditating? What would you say that consists of? What does that look
Uh,
like? What does that look like for you? Because each person is
right.
kind of something different. What does that look like for you?
It looks like for me, having a worship time where I'm spending time with God, not asking. There's times where you're not asking for stuff. Like sometimes people pray, God give me. It's just spending time with Him, whether that's through music, through just sitting there in silence. That's reading the Word. That's interacting with people to actually apply what you're reading. So interacting that part of it. So I think there are a couple of phases that you have that you go through, and of course, kind of naturally is finding you that worship place that feeds you for your life moving forward, and not your life currently, which it does, but it helps you move forward as well.
And that's great, Tony. Coach Tony Kimble, I appreciate you coming on to the Men of Valor Husbands of Purpose. Your story was real. We had a great time. I look forward to working with you once again. For everyone
Thank you.
listening, don't forget to go reach out on Instagram, social media at Coach Tony Kimble. We'll have all his links, everything in the show notes. Peace and blessings. And remember, we're empowering husbands to lead a life of love, faith, and purpose. And together, we lead. Peace and blessings.